Hi, welcome to the pursuit of truth. So, a few stories, another week's worth. Maybe that's how I'll do it from now on. It's a week of news because it covers different things. So we cover Iran, Gaza, the grooming gangs, and the assisted dying bill, which is going on today. So first, with the main story of the week has been Israel and Iran and their conflict with each other. And I've got from Sky News, or actually I think the original one I got from Sky News didn't have the beginning, and I don't like not having the beginning because that was the bit of it. It was the UN ambassador, is it Ali Bahraini, speaking, and this is the one that the previous Pursuit of Truth I was talking about. I'd seen that and I did a bit to the camera because he seems so mild, so well spoken. And I'm not, this isn't just what I'm trying to say is that is what it made me think about is how when you see all these world leaders, they all speak well and they all talk a good talk and they all justify their own country and their own actions and they all come up with different sides. And well, can two truths be this true? I mean, I suppose possibly, but both sides will make allegation against each other, both will blame each other, and just how difficult it is to navigate that, because obviously we know, that human beings have and this is the big problem with truth, is we have the capacity to lie, to deceive, and sometimes even do it without even knowing, in the sense of, the world system that we're all brought up in, that I've talked about in the last one, of we're all a product of our place and time, and thus we could see things in that light and not realise, well, wait a minute, that may not actually be true, or, you don't know the whole story. But just seeing, him talking about a crime against humanity, and like I said, all my knowledge is based on, I'm a product of the place and time I am. I'm a product of, my parents, of my teachers, of TV, of social media, of all the things I've seen. Yeah, I think I've seen two sides of the story as well, because obviously originally I was born non-religious, then I was a Muslim for 10 years. So I've seen different aspects of this, and him talking about the crime against humanity, but then my understanding is, correct me if I'm wrong, obviously I know all those, I don't know how to verify this because this is based on basically the media, isn't it, of saying that Iran are the ones who fund and are involved in Hezbollah and Hamas, who are considered terrorist organisations. I know they probably would see themselves as freedom fighters, same as members in South Africa and members in Ireland may say the same thing, depending on which organisation they were part of. So it's murky, that, isn't it? But the fact is that, they're a different country, but are they coming to the defence of Palestinians? But then again, their actions show them not to be peaceful, because from anyone's standpoint, and especially a religious person's standpoint, when religions have quite a lot of guidance on what is acceptable in conflicts and etc., and the duty of human beings, to arm an organisation that is just going to, put a bomb somewhere and indiscriminately kill innocent people, or kidnap people, or drop bombs on areas that are not meant to be, schools and all that kind of protected areas. And I know they could say the same about the other side. I get that. But what I mean is that kind of action, and because it's quite interesting to hear, because there was an Israeli soldier, retired, I think, general. She talked about, the thing we don't think about because we're not in this place is the constant attacks that Israel gets from its neighbours, from, I guess, Lebanon and Palestine and etc., in the forms of Hezbollah and Hamas. And to have to live, hearing her living that she lives, she doesn't have her own bunker, but she has to go to a safe place when the alarm goes off. I mean, to live like that, that's like how people lived in the Second World War, to hear an air raid siren and have to run to shelter. Imagine how scary that is, and have to do that on a day-to-day basis. And this is even before the preemptive, as they call it, strike on Iran. This has been happening for, the fact that they have bunkers says everything. And the fact that, like we know, on October the 7th, the most recent case of when Hamas took people, kidnapped people in the 21st century. People that, they're not soldiers. They're civilians. I know they may argue about that, but I think it's because when you hear the rhetoric of a handful of Israelis and a handful of Iranians or Palestinians, they all talk about the other side as if they are less than human or not human. They don't use words that dignify them as being human beings. And I know they have enmity towards each other, but that doesn't excuse the language that you hear being used to describe fellow human beings, and especially because if you believe in God, like most of this holy region does, they're all his children, and you're all brethren of each other. And you all forget that because of your hatred overtakes your heart, which of course most religious people would believe would be a devilish thing. The problem is it's a mix between that and the Western world, the modern world of weapons, of bombs, of all this kind of stuff, and war and justification for that, in the sense of that that people can be justified to do preemptive attacks because they say, well, this place is going to cause me a danger in X amount of time. And I get it, if it was a genuine concern, and this is the thing I don't know, because I can't see inside the hearts, only God can. But if they had intelligence to realise that Iran were going to do this, that they were enriching and they were going to get a bomb. Now the thing is, like, everyone has nuclear bombs. Lots of countries have nuclear bombs. Lots of maybe countries who shouldn't have nuclear bombs have nuclear bombs. But it still hasn't been used. But I guess the thing is, like, anyone can press that button and start it off. Anyone can get angry and do it. And I guess from the West point of view, they feel that certain countries don't show the responsibility that's necessary. I don't know whether that's founded or not, but we do seem to be living in this worrying time when it comes to this. And that's why we should all be doing the non-proliferate, which I think Reagan and was it Thatcher started signing back or Gorbachev, of getting rid of the weapons, of nuclear weapons. Then, of course, they all talk about, it's a deterrent. I don't know, it's just what's the word? Disappointing that we're still, having this conversation. And that you don't know who to believe, because both sides will talk about, this country did this one did this one hit, this one's hitting hospitals now, but this one hit hospitals before. Oh, but no, but we're not doing it purposely. And like, there's a bit about to do with hospitals, to do with the bit that comes later, to do with the doctors British doctors who have been in Gaza, going on to Gaza now, who are documenting their time there, talking about the injuries that they're seeing coming in, and the fact that medical workers and journalists and etc. are being targeted. I mean, the journalists will easily say these things, and of course the Israelis or the IDF will come back and say, no, we're not deliberately doing that. And I don't necessarily believe that they're doing it. I don't think that they're doing it deliberately. I don't think they're setting out. And this is where they can answer that question, really, is like, I don't think they are planning, I want to hit a hospital. Because this is the problem with how you use your language, how you phrase your questions, and how you make it easy for the other side to get out. Because I think the journalists quite well know that, like I am assuming, and of course, and this may be based on bias and all the media stuff that we hear of different countries and how we see each other, but I don't think they're sitting in their war room saying, well, I want to hit that hospital there because it's a hospital and I want to kill all those innocent people. Because they know how the media are using this to because they instantly would not talk about adults, they talk about children, because obviously we know children are definitely not part of the mass. But of course it gets to the heartstrings, which is, what we saw in Iraq and Afghanistan, how they tried to use that as a pretense. So I get why journalists do that, and of course you're playing into that. So I don't think it's that deliberate. So to use that word deliberate, they know it's not deliberate. I don't think it is deliberate. But what I do think is that I don't think due care and attention or reverity is being put on those places, or the following of international law, because obviously international law prohibits you from targeting such places, unless, but I believe there's an unless, it's being used for a military purpose. The problem is because it is both could be used as a military, the tunnels and Hamas being in there, but also being used as a public thing. It's like, I've used this as an example. If, there was people that were guns and kidnapped people in a bank, they wouldn't just, or in a hospital, they wouldn't just blow up the whole hospital and say, well, that's justification because there are bad people in there, and there's, the rest is collateral damage. It wouldn't happen. You'd have to send in snipers. You have to be very precise. You have to only be able to kill or negotiate and only be able to kill the actual people and not all the other people that are inside that place. So that's the problem. Now, so that's where I think the issue is that I don't think they care too much, because of the rhetoric we hear from both sides. I think on both sides, I don't think they care too much that if they do accidentally kill some civilians, they don't feel that that's a reason not to do it. Whereas, that, and I suspect that's true of all generals and all wars, where they will take that decision of which probably we saw in Vietnam or Iraq, Afghanistan, or even the Second World War, is that, like with the bombing of Dresden by Churchill, that they will take the ideas that this is a necessary thing, that it was an unfortunate thing, but we don't really want to do it, but we've been forced to do it because of the situation we're put in. And then, of course, the blame goes on the other side. So that's why I think it is. I don't think it's deliberate, and I feel journalists need to be very careful of their questions, otherwise they give an easy way out. They should be asking, is enough being done to making sure that international law is being followed and that civilians aren't being killed? Because I don't know. But the thing is, now it makes me think when you hear another one of them, another IDF spokesman talking about, later on you hear of how that he's suggesting that these things aren't actually happening, and now it makes you think, well, wait a minute, we're basing a lot of our information that we get from Sky News or BBC is based on the Palestinian journalists that are there, and the health figures and stuff from the Hamas-run government, which of course may be like in all wars, truth is the first casualty, may be making these things up. And also these Palestinian journalists, we don't know how, because we're all product of our place and time, whether the stuff is truthful, whether they are also members of Hamas. But of course we do have more independent people, like the surgeons, the NGOs, the aid side of it, UN. I know Israel will say they've been infiltrated, but there's lots of people, what's the Red Cross, and assuming that they are coming from international places. So we are getting different people saying the same kinds of things. So that does make you think, like in a court case, if so many different people from different places are saying the same kind of story, then there must be some truth to it, you would have thought. So I don't know, but it leaves us in that murky area of well, you've been telling us all these things, and wait a minute, are we now saying that, because unless we have video footage of it, when the hospital, we've seen Al Shira and those hospitals getting bombed and things, but do we know that they did evacuate everyone? Did they evacuate everyone from those places? Are they allowed to evacuate everyone from a hospital under international law? That's the other question. So I don't know. It's very murky, isn't it? Because it's easy just to switch on TV and see these things. And the journalists have always, playing devil's advocate, and always say, because they want that sometimes they're not necessarily that considerate of the truth, I question. And so are we left with the truth at the end of it? You could be banging on about something that the other side says, well, no, that's not true. But of course, if that was the case, and they know that's happening, then the easiest way to stop that would be to allow international journalists in there, like all major war zones have always done. It's always been the case. And usually they're controlled better by that. But of course, if there are things going on, that may be a reason why they don't want them in there. I'm not sure whether they are concerned about what happens to them, but they may be, because they know that when, like we've seen on the media, when an international person gets killed or something, it becomes a bigger story and the politicians have to get involved. Whereas when it's just Palestinian children or people, it doesn't get the same attention. We've seen that. We've seen that happen, unfortunately. So the other story I got was about the grooming gangs. I don't know too much about it, other than the Rochdale and to do with, Pakistani men, some Pakistani men forming groups to take underage, I assume it's underage, or girls that are off the radar, and sexually abusing them, raping them. And I'm assuming that they're suggesting that the government or police haven't been collecting that kind of data because their fear of being called racist. So this was a bit of this story. What interested me is the fact that the lady is going through her report and basically saying, like, there's been reports before, 10 years old, 15 years old, lots of, these ideas of what should be done, and nothing's been done, even though recommendations have been given. And that was what interested me, part of it, and shows that the bureaucracy, and I don't know if this is with all governments, but it does tend to be a certain part of British governments of being very slow and always having, like, need 15 signatures and 3 reviews before anything's done, or until someone comes along who actually is going to do something, and then suddenly it all gets done, like you see even in work structures as well. But it just showed that, a lot of the times know what the problem is, nothing's done. We can go back to even like Jimmy Savile or things like that, where people or women who have been victimised, who have been raped, and they come to the police and tell them their story, and a very difficult thing to do, and they tell them, and then they don't get the help, and then years later you find out, or this person got murdered by their partner, or this person carried on doing this and was reported to the police, but nothing was done about it. I'm sure the police would have a different view of that, but it just interested me on that side of it, the fact that that's how we run. Nothing changes because we need so many reviews, and then you can commission a review, like, look at Grenfell, how many years that's been, and all these other things, the blood scandal and the post office and all that kind of stuff, all these different reviews, and you still have to, you have 20 years of it, and then you get a review, and then still you still have to fight to get your money, or to get compensation, or to get that sorry, or to get the acknowledgement that this is, the truth. It's an unfortunate way that our world works. No wonder we never get to truth. And what was the other story I had? So we've done Israel, we've done Iran, we've done Gaza, we've done the grooming gangs. Oh, the assisted dying bill. There was a lady talking about, she looked actually pretty well, but she was talking about she has, terminal liver failure and cancer and a few other things, and she wants, I guess, the assisted dying, and the bill's going through today. But it's very difficult because, there's a lot of people who are concerned about, that if doctors are involved because of Hippocratic Oath and them being, they're meant to save people, and the problem of being like with a crumbling NHS or doctor service, or, whether the healthcare is not very good, especially to do when people get elderly or people get old, or with long-term medical conditions where they're going to end as terminal, and the palliative care not being very good. And, if people are going through pain, they don't want to go through pain. They'd rather die than go through pain. But it may be that the palliative side, the pain side of it is not actually being done properly, and it will lead to people maybe making that rash decision. Like this lady, she was seeing this bill from in November and didn't think she would live this long, but she's still alive. You know, sometimes you can make a decision, like there's people who commit suicide or try it and then realise that, oh, I'm glad I didn't do it because I wouldn't have got all this, that and the other. I don't know, it's a very difficult one with the assisted dying, because I can see arguments from both sides. I can see arguments from those people who are suffering and don't, you know, because the thing is, anyone can take your own life. That's the thing. You know, if you had this terminal disease and you know you're going to die, well, you could kill yourself if you're confident or clever enough to do it, in the sense that you know how to make it painless, or you could get a gun and shoot yourself or whatever. But of course, there's a lot of people that, yeah, I could see if it was me, if I had something that I know I was going to die in 6 months, and it's going to be very painful, and I'm going to lose my ability to breathe, I'm going to lose my ability to move or speak. I mean, that sounds like a most terrible punishment or way to die, rather than just falling asleep, if you had the choice. But I know that I wouldn't be able to, you know, to kill yourself is a big thing, and to, you know, to get enough tablets and to actually do it successfully. That would be like, and there's a lot of people that wouldn't be able to do that. So it's the people who can, you know, kill themselves, who have a terminal disease. I'm sure that's already happening. And so what you're really doing is maybe protecting those ones who, at the end, in the end, have to suffer because they are unable to do it themselves. And that's the kindness that maybe would be shown by having the assisted dying. But then on the alternative, I get the idea of that people could be pressurized into doing this, you know, because not everyone is like free of mind and thought. And especially if you have some kind of medical condition like dementia or this, that and the other, or a mental health condition, you know, like a severe form of autism, etc., where you could persuade the person to maybe present themselves in front of a doctor or a psychiatrist believing that they want to die, and maybe it's coercion. So I get it from both sides. Unfortunately, if we lived in a world where we knew that the only people would be actually their decision being made is, then of course we could just do it. But unfortunately, we don't live in a world like that, because we live in a world where we can lie, and there's deceit, and there's coercion, and there's all sorts of things. So I don't know what's going to happen. I suspect it's going to pass. And then maybe in a few years' time, we're going to hear the horror stories of people that shouldn't have died that did. I don't know. And whether this will, you know, for the NHS and government will see this as a good thing, because they will be able to save money on palliative care, and maybe those things will fall by the wayside because more people will take up the idea of assisted dying. But that's not really the way to solve the problem, is it? Like I say, we live in a world where we created all these problems ourselves by having a system where we divide ourselves up. We live our lives on caveman instinct of pride and possession and greed, of bits of land. This is mine, that's yours. We're going to fight over it. And I'm going to control you because I want to have the power over you. And I'm going to create money and all these different things in the way so that we don't actually have to, you know, all live perfectly well, even though everything we need is all there, and all the brain power is all there, and energy and resources all there. We could do all that, but I'm going to put all these things in the way so that we can't do all that. And people are going to unnecessarily have pain and suffering because of the system that we live within, that I bang on about all the time in the pursuit of truth. It always seems to come back to that, because the thing is, that is the truth. If we did live in a system where we didn't have all these things that are needlessly keeping us from doing all the things that we should be doing for each other as human beings. Anyway, take care, take it easy, God bless, and peace.
Israel, as in Iran, tragic stories are emerging of families with no role in this conflict being caught up and killed in it. They include Palestinian citizens of Israel. Sky correspondent Cordelia Lynch spoke to one man who's been left to bury his wife and two daughters. Have a listen.
Tamra, a town in despair, grieving 4 members of the same family, where they mourn huddled together, a place to find solace where there are no answers.
Leanne, how deep is this loss for you?
It's very deep. It hurts my soul. This community lost them. Manar al-Asim, she's a teacher. Shada is a 20-year-old. She wanted to become a judge. She wanted to be someone. That Hala is only 13 years old. No one is protected. That's the thing. No one is protected. Not Arabs, not Jews, not Palestinians, not Israelis. No one is protected.
The Khatib family home was eviscerated by an Iranian missile bound for Haifa in Israel, more than an hour away. This is a tight-knit town. Most living here are Palestinian citizens of Israel.
We found body here, the woman, and blood at the wall, and some pieces there at the garden and the neighbors everywhere.
Ahmad was horrified to see parts of his neighbors' bodies thrown across the road.
After 2 days, 3 days, you still scared.
There were safe rooms here, but they weren't enough to protect those inside from the force of a ballistic missile. Floors collapsed and a family was torn apart in an instant. This is a residential neighborhood. The victims were civilians, and it is their neighbors and their friends that are clearing up the rubble and ruins of lives lost. Here you see the skies lit up and then the devastating strike. But this video is just as stunning. The sound of Jewish Israelis from a nearby town rejoicing. May your village burn, they sing. No one will find that harder to hear than Raja, who lost his wife and 2 daughters.
I feel terrible. I feel fire in my body. I lose my family. For what? For what? For a missile to become the Iran.
This conflict with Iran, can you see an end to it?
Conflict with Iran, conflict with Gaza, conflict with Lebanon, conflict with Syria. We have a government, we have people that they want the war. They want the war. We want peace. We want to live.
This is a place caught in the crosshairs of a conflict they have no say in, and very little shelter.
And we'll be speaking.
Your recommendation for a national inquiry. Clearly, you said in media interviews that you changed your mind on that. Was there a specific part of the evidence base that made you come to the conclusion that this was a necessity?
Very much so, yes. So, you know, it's not like anybody publicly asked me my view, incidentally. I wasn't on the record somehow giving media interviews saying, I don't know, busy worrying about actually social care post-Christmas. So, you know, I had other things on my mind. So, but that said, I was of the group, and I said this to Downing Street, which is, you know, when we were in a discussion about it really early on, I think I would have said to anybody that asked me, do we really need another national inquiry? Alexis J did a 7-year inquiry. It was pretty thorough. I followed Alexis into Rotherham all those years ago. She's a pretty thorough lady. And I was of the view, because I've also written reports that haven't been implemented, perhaps we ought to implement the recommendations of her report before we start thinking about anything else. So I was definitely there, and I own that. Now, during the course of the review, it became abundantly clear on a number of fronts that if we didn't have a national inquiry as opposed to just a series of local inquiries, then we wouldn't get to the issue of accountability. And so as much as again, I think those of you that have got some knowledge of me around the table will know that I, you know, like finding criminals and I like locking them up for a very long time. And if I was going to spend money on anything, I spend money on more prison places and more police officers. So I'm pretty tough on crime. And so I also had to be convinced that we needed what at, you know, some level I was thinking, if I'm going to ask the public to spend money on anything, do you know what? I think I'll go and get some more criminals. So that's very much was my position. And then during the course of the audit, a few things came to light very, very clearly. First of all, when they made an announcement in January that they were asking, had at least the money for 5 areas to do local inquiries, and that, everybody would somehow come forward and vote, decide to do these inquiries, only Oldham bit the bullet, and that's how I describe it, and said, yep, we want to do a local inquiry. My understanding is nobody else volunteered for that. So that tells you something, doesn't it? It tells you something, and it doesn't tell you something I certainly would want to hear if I was a victim. Then we head into looking at some of these reviews. There's a number of comments made. The most important one at this point in the chronology is I couldn't understand why Andy Burnham was asking for a national inquiry. So in amongst everything else, we looked at his assurance reviews. So Andy Burnham, quite rightly, in my view, did a bit of what I'm doing, which is he thought, this stuff is going on in Greater Manchester. I need to be assured, he called them assurance reviews, what's going on in Rochdale, what's going on in Oldham. I need to see what the police are doing, and he'd had actually victims and Maggie Oliver in a big meeting in whatever it's not the town hall, but whatever his, place is in Manchester. And they'd all agreed that, people had to be held to account. We had to find out the truth. We had to find out where decisions made. If you look at the assurance reviews that he had done, he was so frustrated, and so would I have been, so were the people that did those reviews, that it took years. Nobody shared data. They were all lawyering up to fight over who would share what data. And, that I put it in more mild terms in the report, but when it came to report 3, which I think was like 4 or 5 years later, the guys resigned, and the thing was handed over to sort of a statutory body in the National Inspectorate and Ofsted. And so I thought to myself, okay, guys, come on. Nobody's volunteering to find the truth here, and we owe these victims that. Secondly, you see, extremely important assurance reviews by Greater Manchester Mayor, who's one of the, long-standing mayors, knew what he was doing. He couldn't get to the bottom of it. And then you look at the 50 serious case reviews, and you look at the world of serious case reviews, and you see that, to be honest, Mr. Richards, they do not get to the truth of what happens in these cases. What they do is, has the team around the child operated effectively? Now, that's really important, don't get me wrong, but, part of the team around the child are the perpetrators, who spot that the team around the child isn't good enough or can't safeguard that child enough. Do we talk about the predators in any of these serious case reviews? Did we know about these predators? Were we properly safeguarding the children? Sorry, you can tell from my tone. I said to everybody, I'll be really measured. Don't worry, I won't get, like that about it. But when you start talking about this, you think, yeah, that's why I want a statutory inquiry. And that's why it has to be national with strong local, there's a connection between the local and national. So I know it's not what everybody wanted, but I think it's absolutely the right thing to do.
Just finally, recommendation 12 is about funding. Predominantly, you mentioned money for prisons, you mentioned money for police officers. I mean, have you had any assurances that there is going to be funding for this going forward, or is that a recommendation and you wait and see from government?
Well, the recommendations, all 12 of them, were accepted unreservedly by the government yesterday, and I put recommendation 12 in deliberately to ensure, apart from the fact I only like even numbers, but leaving that, I'm sorry, I'm in that mood today, aren't I? I can tell. It's a really important thing to make sure that we don't let the victims down again by not doing this properly. So, having gone from, is this the right way of spending public money 4 months ago, I think it's the right way to spend public money. We made it a recommendation so that, in 6 months' time or 2 months' time, people such as yourselves are able to ask the government what has happened with that recommendation, because it means every time people double check on the recommendations, their implementation, one of them will be on money. But to be fair, we only gave them a report about 10 days ago, and they were out yesterday responding to it. So I'm sure there's detail on each one of those recommendations that has to be worked through.
Thank you.
I agree about the IT systems and how crucial that is, but if you're not collecting accurate, robust data, then it doesn't really matter what IT system you have, right? So what, can you talk a little bit more about the gaps in the data? You did mention ethnicity, but are there any other kind of egregious examples that you think that we should remedy now? I mean, it seems to me extraordinarily urgent that we start collecting robust, comprehensive data now, otherwise it will affect the national inquiry. Did it affect your ability to perform this audit effectively? And what those challenges look like?
Yes, it did affect our ability to our job was to assess the scale of group-based child sexual exploitation, and in that we have not been able to provide an answer because of the data systems, and it sort of also starts right from the it starts kind of from the fact that we don't have a kind of robust, up-to-date prevalence survey, so we don't know how much child sexual abuse there is in the country. There's a few sort of reasonably educated estimates, but we don't have anything up to date. The last one was like 12 years ago or something that was accurate. So you can start at that point, and so how many, what are we looking for, kind of how much is going on, and then we can see what services, whether people are coming to services or not. So that's your first point, is that we estimate 500,000 children a year are sexually abused in a kind of in a kind of umbrella way of sexual abuse in different forms. And then beyond that, we have the next piece of information down is the policing reports of child sexual abuse. Some of that is flagged when it's child sexual exploitation, but police flags are notoriously poor. They're not used well, and when we looked at, when we talked to police forces and we looked at their problem profiles, we found that the flags weren't being used that well. So there's an estimate that tells you that there are 17,000 CSE crimes a year. But we can't rely on that necessarily. And so 2 years ago, the Child Sexual Exploitation Task Force, which is kind of a national policing capability, started collecting, asking police to send them their data, and they are kind of basically analysing it manually, effectively, to look at the number of child sexual abuse cases which fall into the sexual exploitation and are carried out by more than 2 people. So that's what they have to do, that kind of incredibly difficult and labour-intensive exercise. And that told us there were 719 group-based child sexual exploitation crimes in 2023. Now, so we started up there half a million a year, and we get down to 700 crimes. We think, we think for a start that because most child sexual abuse is not reported anyway, we have a massive underestimate of what's happening. But that's like the best we got after however many years of saying we really need to collect this information.
What needs to happen now to ensure that this doesn't happen in the national inquiry? Have you got any thoughts on?
Well, I think just to start on the CSE task force are planning, the government have accepted that they will collect data in a more robust way. So we will get some of that, and I think we've said that we need mandatory ethnicity collection of data when it comes to child sexual abuse, and the government have accepted that. So it's not. I think it's probably not mandatory. Totally mandatory at the moment. It's all done by encouragement. I think it's
all done by encouragement at the moment.
But we think it needs to be mandatory.
To be fair, it's Theresa May as Home Secretary. I think a bit into her term that wanted the flagging process, and she wanted that flagging process because, having said at the beginning of her term, press on, she realised, I think, I'm not speaking for her, incidentally, I haven't asked her this, but my judgment of what she did was think, I need to get across CSE. And so you then introduce this flagging process, because of course when somebody is arrested, the series of crimes that you are labelling are quite complicated. That said, all of these years later, for that not to have been implemented more effectively, I draw a conclusion from that you know, that's not good enough. And then I put that together with where we are in 2025 and think there must be better, both technical and other solutions to how you would get that right, if you really wanted to.
I'll stop there, Chair, just to
And
allow others.
And I very briefly attended a session last week. I was in between meetings, but I popped into an APPG on missing people, where I understand there's a different approach to missing being piloted in Scotland at the moment around return interviews and recording of data, etc. It's always felt to me that, and you referenced it in the report, that missing, because of the lack of consistency around the way police record it and the way that local authorities perhaps consider it, those children who are missing are the children who are being exploited for county lines, who are the children who are being exploited by grooming gangs. It feels like, you know, and you talk about 10 years ago, we were trying to put this together 10 years ago and say, you need to join this up.
So I think one of the things I think I'm hoping that such a big move on consent is, the reason I'm pushing for it is because it's symbolic of what we think about children. So I think the way we come at missing at the moment, and you know, and this is good people trying to do it, feels very much in how many times has somebody gone missing and are we getting the returning interviews right? So it feels very transactional, and it's missing a bigger point, which is, I hope that if anybody has teenage girls and adolescent girls in the room right now, if they disappeared overnight and they switched their finds a friend off, you would be beside yourselves. Absolutely beside yourselves. But because we're dealing with kids that haven't come from that, we as a state attempt to have a safety net. And that safety net doesn't see that missing, so even though it's an important thing and you have missing task force and that sort of, it doesn't grasp the bigger picture. And I think fair play to West Yorkshire Police. They have an analyst, Mr. Smith, I've forgotten his first name, and Paul Smith. And after Rotherham had happened, he, you know, often in public service you find individuals, don't you, and you think, wow. And so he developed what they call an algorithm. I'm not sure it is an algorithm, but let's go there. And essentially what he did was say, if we put together missing more than twice and put that across, I mean, you'll be aware of this, put it across kids perhaps in children's homes, I think it is, or in child in need. Then they put it across whether they'd ever been on the radar of anywhere in the criminal justice system. Hey presto, you have a completely different cohort. And I think that we say as a system, and I include myself in this, missing is really important, but then it really turns into a transaction rather than, oh dear God, where is this child? Now, if we had rape laws that meant when said child has gone out all night with said perpetrator and his friends, that we will do them for rape, it changes the conversation of the state, really, because rape is seen as one of the most, quite rightly, terrible things that can happen, and particularly terrible things if it can happen to children. So in a way, I'm trying to use the opportunity of this audit to say, how do we reset how we think about children? And it's also why, Dame Karen, I'm so concerned about the whole children's services side of this, in that I think they don't even see those children. So how can you know, you would look at missing, you would look at who's on your child in need, you'd look at the moment, they just have neglect for most of these kids. I think there's some very profound questions to be asked about what's happening in and around children, of which missing, we call it a red flag. You know, you think some sort of beaming noises, you know, a beep should go off on my phone when Louise Casey goes missing. I'm sure there's plenty of politicians that wish that was possible, but you know, it's sort of, and yet it's not. It's like, well, if you got the returning home interview right, And I think we're just in the not right place on it. And it screams out of the voices of the kids in this report.
It's the lack of joining up on all of this and the lack of all the agencies.
Exactly.
And I was thinking earlier about when you were leading on troubled families, and I worked with you on that.
Exactly.
The joining up made all the difference, and we simply haven't joined up on all of these different red flags that absolutely should be front and centre, and the agencies, and I'm afraid there's a tendency, tick the box, I've done my job, I've covered myself, I've covered my colleagues, but I'm not going to apply judgment, and I'm not going to join this up, and that needs to change.
I 100% agree.
Thank you. Chris Murray.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, thank you all three of you for this very important report that you've produced. I just want to go back into that question of when you decided to call for a national inquiry, because we had Alexis J here, we had Tim Crowther here. You said yourself your own views evolved on the need for a national inquiry, and I cannot tell you how shocking it was to read, or how disappointing it was, those pages in your report of the timeline of how little has happened over the years. And, I worked on anti-trafficking for 4 years, and I've spent so much time reading reviews like this, submitting evidence. There's been task forces, there's been reviews, there's been inquiries. My question is, how do we ensure that there just is not more delay? How do we ensure that this new national inquiry does not become... I understand completely your reasons for calling for it, which you've set out really comprehensively, but how do we stop people in the system using that as like, well, that's for this national inquiry, we're not going to move forward on that? And can I ask you specifically, we will have the Home Secretary at this committee in 6 months' time. Which of your recommendations should we say to her, have these been implemented yet? So we use this inquiry as your report as a fire break on, so there's action and not just more discussion.
So, to the last question, the reason that there's so much that we could want to come from the audit findings, and we zeroed in on 12, and we did that deliberately so that we looked at what we thought would be the most significant 12, in order to get the biggest change possible. So obviously I have strong views on other areas, such as serious case reviews, just to put that back in. But we zeroed in on 12, and I think that I would like you to hold to account the government in 6 months' time for what action has happened on all 12. I don't think that's an unreasonable thing. That if I'd done 300 or 200...
I want to leave that Home Office Select Committee, Baroness Louise Casey there answering questions from MPs, to bring you some breaking lines from both regions in Israel and Iran. The first one is coming from Iranian state media, and they're saying this afternoon that air defences have been activated in western Tehran. And we heard earlier, didn't we, that Donald Trump was telling people to leave the capital straight away. And the other line is from Israel. Let me just pull that up for you. And they're saying that the media there is saying that Israel is attacking western Iran. So those two pieces of developing news for you there. We'll be keeping an eye on that throughout the afternoon, of course. And then we're going to go live now to central London, I believe, where the Conservative leader, Kenny Basnott, which is holding an event, and this is following Baroness.
Good morning. We start this hour with breaking news, and Iran's foreign ministry has warned that any intervention from America in the conflict with Israel would be a recipe for an all-out war in the region, they say. The comments followed Donald Trump's meeting with his Security Council in the White House Situation Room, where he was considering America's next steps. Let's listen to what Iran's foreign ministry said in the last few moments.
I think any American intervention would be a recipe for an all-out war in the region with very, very bad consequences for the whole international community.
In the past few hours, Israel's military announced it had begun a new wave of attacks on Iran, targeting the Tehran area. This video shows some of the weapons being intercepted over the region. Well, overnight, Israel claimed it hit Iranian nuclear and missile sites. The Israel Defense Forces say they attacked a centrifuge production site, which can be used to enrich uranium, which is a key component in nuclear bombs. Iran has disputed this claim, saying the site is only used for missile production. Well, above Tel Aviv in Israel, Iranian missiles were intercepted by its Iron Dome defenses after an evacuation order was issued from Iran. Missiles were also intercepted above the Golan Heights near the border with Syria. No casualties have been reported there overnight. This morning, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, took to social media saying we must give a strong response to the terrorist Zionist regime. We will show the Zionists no mercy, said the Ayatollah. Let's go live to Jerusalem now, and our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle. Morning to you, Ali. The rhetoric really ramping up in the past few moments.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, firstly, what I'd say, without downplaying things, because they are very serious, you know, the rhetoric that we've heard from Iran has not often matched reality. So we've often heard some pretty grand threats about what Iran is going to do, specifically to Israel, which haven't yet, at least, been followed through upon. And the second thing I'd say about what we heard from the Iranian Foreign Ministry there is I think that that is a threat, not so much to the United States, actually, but to other countries in the region, particularly in the Gulf. We've heard statements of condemnation for Israel's attacks on Iran from the likes of the UAE, Saudi Arabia, etc. Privately, their position will be very different to what they are projecting publicly. Iran does not have many friends in the region, but what the Gulf countries will be very concerned about is a spill out of this war. Either the potential that airstrikes, missile strikes could find their way into their countries because, you know, for example, there are US bases all around the region. Perhaps a disruption of the shipping channels around the Strait of Hormuz, for example. So there's a multiple ways that this war could expand beyond the two domains which it's currently in, Israel and Iran. And I think what the Iranian Foreign Ministry is trying to do is, yeah, of course, warn Donald Trump about the consequences of getting American troops involved, but also, you know, send out a warning to the Middle East region in the hope that they then in turn put pressure on Washington not to get involved.
Ali, thank you very much indeed. Well, as we've been hearing, Israel's main goal appears to be destroying Iran's potential to create nuclear weapons, and it could ask America to help destroy a key nuclear site. Our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, has been looking at the options.
If the United States is to join in with this war, then there's a fair bet it will involve the Fordo nuclear facility. It is Iran's most heavily protected nuclear location, 20 miles northeast of the holy city of Qom. It's an obvious and important target for Israel's attacks, although observers say there are no visible signs of damage there so far. It's a top secret hideaway and it's in remote terrain. The main part of the facility is built into a mountain with tunnels leading deep underground. There are few signs of activity above ground, with one support building and a fortified secure perimeter. The main enrichment halls are buried deep below the surface, too deep for any Israeli bombs to penetrate. The nuclear watchdog, the IAEA, recently suggested Iran has increased production of enriched uranium to 60% at Fordo. The more enriched uranium they have, the more likely that Iran will be able to produce a nuclear weapon. So if their own aerial bombs won't be enough to totally destroy Fordo, what other options do the Israelis have?
The cleanest option would be to ask the United States Air Force to finish the job there. Another option would be to negotiate with the Iranians about the future of Fordo, maybe in exchange for a ceasefire agreement. The Iranians would agree to disable it themselves. The Israelis could also send in a commando team.
If the United States was to help Israel bomb Fordo, what would they be using? The answer is almost certainly the MOP, the Massive Ordnance Penetrator, officially known as the GBU-57. It's America's largest non-nuclear bomb, a bunker buster designed to blast its way through layers of rock and reinforced concrete to obliterate its target. The bomb itself weighs 13 tons, and each one could penetrate up to 60 meters below the surface. Because of its size, it can only be carried by America's B-2 stealth bombers. So if we see more B-2s heading towards the region, that may be a sign that something is about to happen. There are also reports of a lot of US aircraft on the move, F-15 and F-16 fighter jets and their refueling planes heading from bases in Europe towards the Middle East. Is President Trump preparing for this conflict to widen, or is he using military might to force Iranians to accept peace on his terms and promise never again to build the bomb? Because experts say whatever Israel does to Fordo, destroying it would only set Iran's nuclear ambitions back by 5 years or perhaps a few more. Ending its nuclear plans for good would require defeat on crushing terms dictated by America and Israel, or the end of the regime, or perhaps even both.
And coming up later today, we'll have a live online Q&A with Dominic, who you saw there, along
Conway Sky News. Today.
The UK could be on the eve of perhaps the biggest social change in a generation as MPs prepare for a crucial vote on the assisted dying bill. The MP behind the bill says she's confident that she has enough support, and polling suggests the majority of the public backs the plan. Our health correspondent, Ashish Joshi, has been looking at how the law could work in practice.
You said something very profound when that result was announced.
Yeah, it was that I can die in peace.
Frank didn't know if she would still be alive today when we spoke to her last November. That's when the assisted dying bill passed its second reading. Every day is a battle for Frank. She already had terminal liver disease, cancer, and now she suffers from diabetes and fibromyalgia.
I was taking morphine anyway for pain, but I'm living on morphine. And that's not a life that you want.
The Royal College of GPs says the assisted dying process should happen outside of general practice. Dr. Susie Caesar is in favour of the bill being passed.
I'd say to you as my GP, I need you to be in my head that I have days, I have nights, and they're becoming progressively stronger, where I just feel I want to just go to sleep. And I just don't want to live my life anymore.
Pain is one of the things that medicine is actually relatively good at dealing with. In the event that it gets set up in a structure where I am a stranger, then I would just come and listen and have a long conversation to understand Frank's history, her background, where she's coming from, why she's come to these conclusions.
But important questions remain over who will take the responsibility for determining a patient's mental capacity and their prognosis. Would it be fair for me to say that you approach Friday's vote with some trepidation?
For wills.
If this bill as it stands proceeds, through the rest of the parliamentary process, we as psychiatrists are left in a situation where there are so many unknowns about what is expected of us, about what patients can expect, and about the safety of the process. Yes, I do. I approach this professionally with trepidation.
Frank continues to defy her prognosis, but she doesn't look further than the next 6 months.
It's not going to happen in my lifetime, but the thought that people like me who still try to look nice, who still try to have a life and everything, that that they can just have some peace of mind, and they can just have like a weight lifted off their shoulders, knowing that they're going to be able to do it peacefully with their family and everything.
Ashish Joshi, Sky News.
A government whip has resigned tonight over the proposed changes to disability benefits. In a letter to the Prime Minister, Vicky Foxcroft, the MP for Lewisham North, said she could not vote for reforms which include cuts to disabled people's finances. Responding tonight, the government said the welfare system is broken and it's fair and responsible to fix it. The plans will return to the Commons on the 1st of July. President Zelensky has appointed...
Thank you, everybody, for attending this briefing meeting. When we were arranging this meeting. No one of us was well expecting that this briefing will take place at such a complicated time. But I'm happy that it is a good opportunity for me to share with you our positions with regard to current developments in our region. Before starting, I have to make an apology because I have to leave this meeting for a few minutes to take part in the Human Rights Council and make a statement over there. But I will be back very soon, and I ask you to stay. We have a lot of things to discuss here, and I'm completely ready to listen to your questions and explain for you our positions. If you allow me, first let me to start by saying a few words about the current situation, and then I am ready and open to any questions, and it will not be limited to these developments. Any issue which you like to raise, I will be available to answer. But as you know, the most important thing is now the aggression made by Israel regime against Iran on 13 June, which has targeted civilians, women, children, civil infrastructure, even peaceful nuclear facilities in our country. Israel has blindly targeted residential areas, populated cities, without giving any prior warning and information, and by very sophisticated methods at midnight, while the people have been at their homes, and they have targeted the homes of civilians, which led to big casualties. As you know, hundreds of innocent people, including big number of children and women, have been killed during these attacks. And a big number of civil infrastructure, including water and energy infrastructure, has been hit and has been destroyed. And there is a danger, a big danger, around our peaceful nuclear facilities because of the possible explosion of the people not only in Iran but in our neighborhood to hazardous leaks. And all these things show that we are facing with an irresponsible entity. And the bitter fact is that this entity is supported by many Western countries, particularly United States, financially and logistically and militarily. They are providing intelligence to this entity. They are providing military arms to this entity. And they are supporting even politically. And they are trying to justify what Israel has done. It is a very complicated situation in our region. There are some things which should be clear for everybody. The first thing is that this is an act of aggression committed by Israel, no doubt about it. There are all elements which can describe an act of aggression. Israel has attacked our country without any reason. Israel has attacked our civilians, our civil infrastructure. And Israel has violated the integrity of Iran, has violated our territorial integrity. and has violated the right of Iranian people to live in peace. This is the first point which I would like to be clear for everybody. The second point is that Israel, during this aggression, has violated all norms of international law and all norms of human rights by targeting civilians, by violating the principle of distinction, the principle of proportionality, and the principle of informing the people about the attacks. And therefore, Israel has violated all norms of international humanitarian law and all principles of human rights. And this is something which should be expressed everywhere and by everybody. And the third point is that Iran will respond. Iran is resolute in responding to Israel attacks. We will show no any doubt, no any reluctance in defending our people, in defending our security, in defending our land. We will respond very, very, very seriously and strongly. And that is what we are doing now. Nobody should expect Iran to show any kind of restraint. Nobody should expect Iran to be indifferent to its security and security of the people. Iran will respond very strongly. And we will stop aggression by all means, and by the confidence that the people of Iran have in our military forces. Our military forces, on behalf of our people, will defend the country and will defeat Israel. They will stop aggression, they will stop aggressors. And nobody should talk about any kind of restraint. And what we are doing now is not only on behalf of the Iranian people, it is on behalf of the humanity, because humanity is attacked. The international peace and security has been attacked. An international order has been attacked. Human rights has been attacked. International law has been attacked. And we are going to defend all of these things. And one of the reasons Israel is continuing committing such crimes is the great impunity bestowed to this entity. Whatever Israel is doing is receiving impunity by Western countries, and particularly by the United Nations Security Council. Nowadays, Security Council has become the most useless organization in the world. It does nothing. It delivers nothing. And that's one of the main reasons why Israel is continuing to commit such crimes. And the same is with the Western countries, particularly the United States. They have covered Israel by huge impunity. And when you look at the positions of different countries, Western countries, European countries, not only they are not condemning the attacks and aggression, they are trying to justify the aggression by baseless allegations, by baseless excuses. And it is shameful for those Western countries who are supporting the aggressor, who are supporting the criminal. Israel is the absolute evil in our region. Israel is the source of instability in our region. Israel is the source of crimes in our region. Israel, for many decades, has violated the rights of Palestinian people. And particularly during the last 2 years, Israel did everything against Palestinian people. I have always thought and asked myself, is there anything new that Israel can commit? Is there any new crime that Israel can reveal? And unfortunately, the answer has been always yes. Israel can every day reveal a new thing, a new crime, and a new innovation in attacking humanity, and a new initiative to breach and to cross the red lines. This is what Israel is, the absolute evil supported by the United States. What my message is to you, ladies and gentlemen, today is that Iran will strongly respond. Iran will strongly defend itself and defend the oppressed people, will defend the international law, will defend the security of our region, will defend the integrity of our country, and we will stop Israel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. So please introduce yourself. First question, Christiane.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ambassador, we are all looking at this in horror at the attacks that happen on all sides. But a question that has fallen by the wayside a little bit, can you explain to us why Iran is enriching uranium to that degree? Because you said it many times, it's peaceful use of nuclear power. No country in the world that uses nuclear power peacefully has enriched it to a degree that Iran has. So I wonder whether you could explain to us what the purpose of that is. Thank you.
Shall I respond by one? Thank you for the question. First of all, there is no any legal instrument preventing Iran making enrichment for peaceful purposes. It is the right of Iran, and nobody can deny this right. It is the right inherent and the right recognized by international instruments, including NPT. Secondly, Iran has always said that our nuclear program is totally peaceful. It is for peaceful purposes. Whatever definition we have made for our nuclear activities is defined by a peaceful purpose. And if there is a criteria for everybody to assess or verify this position of Iran, that would be IAEA. The Director General of IAEA, even recently, yesterday, has stated that there is no any evidence that Iran is following any kind of military nuclear activity. We should all abide by the international instruments. We should recognize the right of the international monitoring system. And there is no evidence that Iran has violated any kind of the legal obligations. Yes, because of our past experiences, we are different from other countries because we cannot rely on other countries to supply the necessities we have. It is our experience in the past during our war with Iraq, nobody was helping Iran, and Iran was alone in front of many countries who were supporting Saddam. Even some European countries provided chemical weapons to Saddam. During the COVID-19, no any country gave Iran vaccines. And we have been deprived by all peaceful technologies by industrialized countries. Therefore, please do not expect us to rely on other countries to provide us with what we need. We have learned through history and through our experience that we have to be independent and we have to rely on ourselves.
Thank you.
Now, after many Gaza hospitals getting hit, now it's happening in Israel as well.
Tomorrow. Now, Israel's defense minister says they will intensify attacks against Iran after an Israeli hospital was hit this morning. The two countries are continuing to trade blows for a seventh day, with the IDF confirming it targeted an Iranian nuclear reactor overnight. Iran has warned any intervention by the US in the conflict would risk all-out war. Let's bring in
I'm in Tel Aviv right now. As you're seeing me, I'm inside my house. I'm one of many Israelis, around 40%, that does not have a safe room inside my house. So when the early warning goes off, when the siren goes off, because those are two different warnings, it means I need to go to a place to be safe. So in this attack this morning, nobody was killed in Israel, and everybody looks at it in the terms of how many people have been killed. But what the Islamic regime just targeted, what they just attacked, and quite proudly, they know they hit a hospital, is the biggest hospital down south. You know, we have the same kind of national health system that you have in the UK. We're very proud of it. It is a very large hospital. It takes care of all of Israel's southern residents. It has an enormous maternity ward, and the area that was directly hit by the missile was only evacuated yesterday. And I look at that right now and I think just of these different distances. It isn't an exchange of blows. There's no question here that Israel initiated a campaign against the capabilities of the Islamic regime. And we're seeing those incoming rockets, those heavy-duty, half-a-ton missile heads that are coming in and doing devastation. But we do feel that we are protected, safe, as long as we do what we're told.
It's interesting to hear you say that Israel did initiate the attacks. What do you think is likely in the next few days? Let's say, first of all, if the US does not come in, do you expect more of the same, or do you expect things to intensify?
I don't see them intensifying. When I say more of the same, Israel has achieved since Friday, and we're already on Thursday today, the term in military terms is air superiority. We can send our different platforms and we can target the Iranian Revolutionary Guard targets, the missile sites, the nuclear sites, the different sites that are military installations throughout all of Iran. We did that in that initial attack on Friday morning, but that was the strike that was the beginning of a campaign. So we'll continue to attack the nuclear sites, the missile sites, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard and those installations, as we've been doing, even if the Americans do not join in.
Do you expect the Americans to join in?
It's the question that everybody's asking. I'm smiling as if it's something happy. I don't know. If there's one thing that I won't answer, and I don't mean to be cute about it, is what President Trump will decide or not decide to do. There's no question that they're gathering forces. There's no question that they're taking precautions. And if the United States joins in, that would be much more focused on specifically some of the nuclear sites. But in the meantime, Israel is continuing with this campaign against not symbols of the Islamic regime, not at all against the Iranian people, but against this regime that makes these weapons, exports them to all of their proxies, has used them with their proxies against us for 24 years, and is trying to achieve nuclear capability against all of those different targets.
I'll come back to the Iranian targets in a moment, but just to close off the question about the US, do you think Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump, their relationship is in a decent place, a very good place? Was it a little bit strained, for much of the last few months?
I don't know that answer.
I live in a very strange world for the last few months, and can I say for the last 20 months, and I want to say even longer. I'm inside Israel, a country that's been under attack from so many different things, and it's being vilified as being the aggressor. And I say that because the Islamic regime has been attacking Israel for so long. And in this case, President Trump is the United States of America. We're not the 51st state of the United States. We're here in the Middle East. We border Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, and Egypt, not the United States. So the relationship between the two figures, we're not in the room with them. I don't know. I think that they both have very strong bases and they work very strongly with both their political bases, but they also have ideologies. And here I will say, as somebody who has been very much vehemently against a lot of policies of this prime minister that I am inside the country of, meaning I've been against a lot of policies of Prime Minister Netanyahu, but this issue of the Islamic regime, of what they not stand for, of what they've created, is something that has been there for him his entire political life in the 1990s and in the last 15 years. And this isn't because of that you're doing that. This is a clear and present danger against Israel, to me, against broader than that. I'm not sure that President Trump sees it the same. I think that they have both a lot in common, but they also have a lot of differences.
To go back to your point about the targets for Israel in Iran, I mean, presumably you expect there will, and there has been some civilian casualties as well. Do you think Israel has done well to minimize those casualties, or could it be doing more? What's your assessment on the proportionality there in Iran?
My heart goes out to all of the civilian casualties, to the people inside Iran or Tehran, and for that matter, let's be clear, to the people within the Gaza Strip, to the people inside Lebanon. Yes, Israel attacks and targets, and the civilian loss of life is horrible. The fact that Israel has built a lot of protection for its civilian life here shouldn't be held against us. This isn't a football game 25-0. We've had very few, I shouldn't say very few, we've had 25 Israeli casualties from the Iranian missiles, but that's only because we are all given an early warning after they launched the rockets, told to go to safe places, and we've seen how important that is. We don't target any civilian sites. We don't do so in any of the places. One of the challenges that I have is that in the Gaza Strip or in Lebanon with Hezbollah, they hide within the civilian places. Here we're talking about the country called Iran, the Islamic regime. They've ruled there for 45 years. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard is a UK designated terror organization, not just by Israel or the United States or the EU. The UK also sees it as such. All of the targets that Israel has attacked, both the nuclear and the missile and all the different installations inside the cities and outside the cities, are all part of that construction of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. And in that sense, I think we're very targeted, and my heart again goes out to any civilian that is caught up in this.
Clearly, as you said, Israel has had, relatively speaking, success in resisting Iranian retaliation over the last few days, despite, of course, some awful tragedies. If the US were to join in and attack Iran, and if they were to use, in some capacity, British assets, like refueling at a British base, for example, on a British aircraft carrier, what might be Iran's response, do you think, to the US and to the UK?
Iran has preempted you in that sense, in the sense that Khamenei, the supreme leader, already said, UK, don't step in. US, don't step in. By the way, he also said it to Germany and to France. He's trying to deter you. How does he deter you? Same missiles with those heavy-duty half-a-ton explosives that have been hitting Israel can reach London, can reach Berlin. So most definitely that's part of the deterrence, is to make sure you don't join in, because then the Islamic regime won't attack you. I have to tell you from an Israeli perspective, and I don't mean to say this lightly, is the fact that everybody takes for granted that it's okay that the Islamic regime can attack Israel through the proxies, through everything that they supply, that when we preempt now against all of these different facilities, what everybody is worried about is make sure that we don't get involved. For me, that's a little challenging. I'm sitting here right now. The Islamic regime calls the US the big devil and us the little devil, and everybody's kind of okay with the fact that the little devil is being attacked. It must be our problem. And I apologize for being sarcastic on the air, but that's how it looks like from Israel. So in that sense, absolutely, they would definitely try to retaliate. I'm not saying, and I want that to happen to you, but I do think that the Islamic regime is a challenge and a threat. Certainly, if it would go nuclear, not to Israel, but to all of the different values that stand clear for all of us, and we should all be very clear about that.
Miri Eisen, thanks for joining us. Good to see you.
Thank you very much.
Right, now a bit of this, I would watch it all if you get the chance. Some of the bits, I think they put on Sky News already, and they've edited it together as this whole programme, this Gaza Doctors on the Front Line. Here's just a little bit of it.
The best hope as witnesses.
If there's nothing to hide, well, why aren't international journalists allowed in? If there's nothing to hide, why have so many Palestinian journalists been slaughtered? You know, people should perhaps be asking that question.
Has been non-stop. Seen about 12 to 15 patients on the ward.
The doctor's video blogs are gaining a lot of traction on social media platforms.
We need the aid.
And they're creating a lot of noise.
Tell me about the situation where you are.
Well, Dr. Rose joins me now from NASA Hospital in Khan Yunis.
Dr. Potoka, thank you so much for joining us.
Die britische Chirurgin Victoria Rose operiert in einem Krankenhaus in Khan Yunis.
It's the worst I've ever seen it in Gaza. What do you want people to hear from you?
Frankly, I want to stop having to give these interviews. It really has reached the point of utter inhumanity.
The bombing of hospitals and medics goes on, even as Israel seems to bow to US pressure and says it will allow some aid in. But this attack on a doctor's family home really rocks the teams working at NASA Hospital. The bundles being carried out are the charred remains of 9 of the doctor's children. Their parents are both medics, both based at NASA. Their mother, Dr. Allah, only escapes because she was at the hospital working. Their father's critically wounded. Just one child, Adam, survives, but may need his arm amputated, and he's taken to intensive care. He'll need much surgery ahead. He's in ICU with his father, but his father never recovers. Being a health worker in Gaza is one of the most dangerous jobs in the world right now, and all here know it.
It's quite late. I think it's nearly midnight now, and it's been another really busy day of operating.
Yes, it has, and also a sad day. The last patient on my list today was an 11-year-old boy who seemed much younger as we lifted him onto the operating table. His injuries were bad enough, but the background, I think, was worse. In an attack that may have or not have been aimed at his father was very badly injured, but 9 of his brothers and sisters were killed.
Childhoods are snuffed out in an instant. A little girl picks her way out through the fire of an Israeli airstrike, alone. More than half of those killed here turn out to be children. The toddler is called Hanin. Her courage has saved her life. But she is suffering and now an orphan. Her uncle is all that remains of her family.
We appeal to the world, to anyone with a conscience. How much longer will you remain silent? Imagine this was your daughter, your sister. This is injustice. Where is the world? What have we done to deserve this?
18 children formed the bulk of the dead in this single attack. Later we find out the journalist who filmed the fire is himself killed in an Israeli strike, as well as one of the civil defense workers taking part in the rescue. The attacks, with the high child casualties, leaves the travelling doctors increasingly emotional as the end of their trip looms.
We can no longer just stand here and tell you what is happening on the ground. The emaciated bodies lying on the operating table, huge chunks of flesh missing. I want to talk to you about the political class that are complicit in this ongoing slaughter and starvation. They appear on the news shows, give interviews and try to justify what is happening. They have no idea how dangerous their words are. They have never been here. They have never seen with their own eyes what is going on. Heard the screams, smelt the rotting flesh, shuddered from the constant bombardment.
A controversial new Israeli aid distribution system leads to chaos. There's mass panic and multiple claims over multiple days that the Israeli forces are shooting at hungry Palestinians. The doctors deal with the aftermath.
Well, these are all gunshot wounds, and as you can see behind me, we've got all the bays are full, and they're all gunshot wounds. It's absolute carnage here, and there are even more people in the main emergency department. If you come through.
This huge emergency coincides with the doctor's departure.
We are in a very short period of time where we could make a difference here and stop the war. And if we don't, I don't think there will be anything to come back to.
To be honest, I'm angry. I'm angry at what is happening here and the fact that it's still happening and the fact that still the reaction is negligible in terms of action.
They make their way through the rubble that was once Gaza with a UN escort and hear of more hospitals being hit, more casualties for their colleagues left behind to cope with.
This is possibly my last message from Gaza, which is very sad, really, because I'm a bit worried about everybody that we've left that needs further plastic surgery.
Within days of their leaving, there'll be more Israeli attacks against ambulance crews, medics, and hospitals. The Israeli bombardment during the doctor's visit has altered and already changed Gaza, almost certainly forever. It's probably changed the travelling doctors too, who tried their hardest to save lives, but also highlight what's been happening.
The IDF claims Hamas exploits hospitals in Gaza for terrorist purposes, cynically endangering civilians. They say strikes conducted on the European hospital on 13th May did not damage the building itself or harm any patients. The World Health Organization says at least 94% of Gaza's hospitals have been damaged or destroyed. 917 people have been killed in healthcare facilities between October 23 and May 2025.
The eyewitness accounts of Dr. Tom Patoka and Dr. Victoria Rose. And Dr. Rose joins me live tonight alongside the Palestinian journalist Rita Baroud and UNICEF spokesperson James Elder, who's just returned from Gaza as well. But before I speak to them, I just want to show you these faces. At least 41 health workers, nurses, pharmacists, doctors, admin staff, medical students have been killed in Gaza in the past month alone. That's according to Healthcare Workers Watch, an independent charity that collates and verifies the deaths. The World Health Organization says more than 900 people have been killed in healthcare facilities since the war began. Let's bring in Dr. Victoria Rose first. And Dr. Rose, that was an incredibly difficult watch. And I imagine for you and your 11-week blockade on food and medical supplies, the Israeli military finally began to allow aid in last month, but most of it was being distributed on Israel's terms from specially built hubs guarded by the IDF as thousands of people converged on the 3 locations this happened. Have a look.
So most of the men on the floor, mostly children.
Civilians are risking, and in several instances, losing their lives just trying to get food.
We will investigate each and one of those incidents and each and one of those allegations. Many deaths, and it just doesn't have to be this way.
Well, since the aid distribution sites opened nearly 4 weeks ago, an estimated 300 people have been killed and thousands more injured in separate incidents. In many cases, the IDF has said soldiers opened fire when they felt under threat. Well, James Elder from UNICEF was in Gaza for some of that time and joins me tonight from Amman. Thank you very much, James, for joining us here on the program. Just give me your assessment. We obviously just saw what Dr. Rose and her colleagues were able to put together. We produced that documentary, but you've just recently come out and of course you've seen the aid situation on the ground. Just give us your assessment.
Yeah, from a horrifying low base, somehow Gaza has got much worse, much more perilous for a couple of main reasons, Yalda. One is we now have a water crisis, call it a water famine, at a point where if fuel in Gaza is what pumps treatment plants, it's what trumps desalination, it gets trucks across. 100-day blockade. There's been a 100-day blockade, Yalda, of any fuel coming into the Gaza Strip. If that continues, we start seeing children die of thirst. At the same time, if you can add to that, more than 100 children have been coming in with malnutrition every day in 2025. The bombardment continues. As Dr. Rose pointed out very well, the hospitals are pretty much under siege. I went to Nasser. I saw children leaving Nasser without the oxygen they needed. They will die in their tents. So somehow, with a bombardment and now with a water crisis, man-made, this is not logistical. This is a politics of denial, and denial is lethal in Gaza. So yes, this is somehow the most perilous time for children, for families in Gaza.
And James, the other issue, of course, is the Gaza the humanitarian foundation. This new aid distribution system that Israel and the United States has put together, which has been heavily criticized for basically not functioning within the laws of international law, and the fact that we're seeing every day dozens of people killed just trying to get food.
Yeah, it's horrific. Somehow a bad situation's been made a lot worse. And the thing is, there is a system in place, and it was a system you don't have to look. You could look back 30 years, Yalda, because humanitarianism has been doing this in scores of countries since World War II. We just have to go back 2 months. A ceasefire, 500, 600 trucks, 400 a day, 400 distribution points. Humanitarian aid is about going to where people need it. That's why we had 400 distribution points. UNICEF was even going door to door on malnutrition. So it's about making sure everyone can reach it. This is a handful of spots. And they're militarised. You're asking people, you're forcing people because of denial of humanitarian aid elsewhere to go to a combat site, and then excusing the killing of them because it's a combat site. This is it is ludicrous, but it's lethal. Now, in Nasser Hospital recently, I met one of these little boys. Try and picture this, a 13-year-old little boy. His dad gave him money to buy bread. Family is starving, everyone wants to look to famine. Famine's a technical term. When famine occurs, it's too late. Mass death, Yalda, as you know. Starvation's already happening. It's when a child's body starts to collapse. The immune system starts to fail it. This boy's family was starving. They gave him money to buy bread. He saw a flood of people going to one of these sites, so he went. Next thing, as we've seen time and time again, there's shooting, there's quadcopters, a tank shell is fired. When I met him, Abdul al-Rahman, he had shrapnel in his stomach and his spleen. Somehow this little guy, because his family wanted a video because they wanted medical evacuation, like Dr. Rose pointed to, wanted his story told. He sat up through this immense pain. The painkillers are not there. The day I left, he succumbed to those injuries because of that lack of medical care, and because countries, despite their outrage and what's happening, don't open their doors or their hearts to children like him. So he died. He's a little boy who went to get food for a starving family. That's what we are seeing, not one-off, time and time again at these sites.
Yeah, absolutely. We're so grateful that you've joined us and shared this story with our audience. As you say, it's just one of many. James, thank you so much. Well, 3 different accounts from a doctor, a journalist and an aid worker. We wanted to speak to a representative from the Israeli government tonight, but no one was available. The IDF did not respond to our request for an interview. I did speak to a man who until last June was a member of Benjamin Netanyahu's war cabinet and now leads an opposition party. I asked former Defense Minister Benny Gantz whether Israel was deliberately targeting hospitals and healthcare facilities. Just have a listen to his response.
Yalda, this is absolutely not true, and please let me take a minute to explain. Back in 2014, I was I was attacked because I had to attack a hospital that anti-tank weapons were shooting from, and I had to wait to make sure that it's being evacuated from all its people and all its personnel before we hit it. And we did it in 2014. When we went back to Shifa Hospital, and we raided this hospital. We did everything in our capacity to make sure that no one is getting hurt. We even put more equipment into it to support the patients that were there. And by the way, those hospitals are a coverage, or actually they are being used by Hamas to put all their tunnels and all their operational infrastructure underneath those hospitals, underneath those mosques, underneath those schools. So what we are doing is we are alerting them. We are making sure that they are being evacuated, and then we do what we do. We don't go deliberately and directly and hit an hospital just because it's an hospital. No way we're doing it.
Well, I understand what you're trying to say, but Ehud Olmert has said that Israel is committing war crimes. Martin Griffiths, the former UN humanitarian chief, has described the situation in Gaza to us on Sky News, to me, as genocide. We're seeing an outcry and criticism from the international community. If you're saying you're not deliberately targeting civilians, and every day we're seeing dozens of civilians killed when they try and go to food depots for food, if you're saying that is not happening, why not allow international journalists into the Strip to be able to assess this situation themselves?
First, I think there is a huge coverage of media inside Gaza this way or another. So I don't think that's the main issue. I want to emphasize that we are not doing what we are being accused to do. This is not true. And the fact that some Israelis said something, that doesn't make it true to begin with. Yalda, look at me. I approved workers from Gaza to come to Israel. I allowed Israelis to stand up every morning in the Gaza gates to take patients from Gaza to Israeli hospitals to be treated. Palestinian kids that were taken to Israeli hospitals, brought back at the very same day, and the woman who did it, among others, was murdered on October 7. We did everything in our capacity from 2007 on to balance between humanitarian needs, economical needs, operational needs, yet Hamas decided to do what it wanted to do.
That was former Defense Minister Benny Gantz speaking to me earlier. Well, in attacking Gaza, Israel is trying to wipe out Hamas, but at the same time, they are now targeting the so-called puppet master, Iran. The White House confirmed tonight that Donald Trump will make a decision about US military action in Iran within 2 weeks.